John, it's January 2012. What's your New Year's wish for education?
Well, if I give you my New Year's wish for education in England, because we're sitting here and it's a sort of moderately nice January afternoon looking into the future, a number of things come straight to my mind. First of all, however you measure this, and measurement of educational achievement is a pretty rough science, if it is indeed a science, England seems to have slipped on international scales. It's not only England that's slipped. Our nearest, the people we like to associate ourselves with, the United States, both England and the United States have seen their educational standards slipping. Yet both countries are spending more on education now than they've ever done beforehand. And we've got in this country a Secretary of State who's really driven to try and improve standards. But I would take you back to something very simple. If you're thinking about education, the most important thing is the quality of the teachers. Perhaps the second most important thing is the quality of the buildings. The third most important thing is the administrative structures that control all that. Now, at the moment in this country, suddenly the coalition government has gone into a massive program of completely rewriting the structure in which education should flourish. And I'll give you a very straightforward description of what that is. Going back 60 years to 1944, the Education Act simply set out that there was a partnership between central government that defined the general structure and local government that organised the bits on the ground. Those bits on the ground, in case of a place like Bath, something like 100,000 people, maybe 8 or 9 schools, where how do the schools together produce a really good solution? What we now seem to be looking at is saying we don't need any form of local control, we just need every school to be empowered by the Minister of State to have enough money to compete with everybody else. Now, I've travelled this country and I've travelled many other countries, and conditions for schools vary enormously according to the place they're in. It's not difficult, and I've done it, it's not difficult to run a good school in a good middle class area where people are roughly pointing in the same direction. It's much more difficult to run a good school in a community that's had social deprivation and is full of social stretches and stresses. The idea behind the 1944 Education Act was that the local community organisations, the local education authorities, tried to balance out the resources between those schools that could do well naturally and those schools that couldn't. And I've got scars of this because I was headmaster of an old grammar school in Hertfordshire, became a comprehensive school. We were surrounded by a good middle class area. We could do incredibly well. When the local authorities said they were going to cut my budget by 10% so that they could share that money with the poorer schools, my immediate reaction was to be totally incensed and fight everywhere. But actually, as time went on, I realised they were absolutely right. The country needs a level playing field. We haven't got a level playing field. And so just leaving schools to compete one school with the next and the next is atrocious. So we're moving in 2012 into ever more competition between schools to procure more resources, more competition. Nobody is planning the relationship on the ground other than being told, let market forces sort it out. And that basically means the most articulate, the one that's best publicised, does better. It attracts pupils from other schools. As those pupils come in, they bring the money with them. The other school is left with the same buildings, the same need to have a full curriculum, but with only half the number of pupils and far less money. Those schools gradually stagnate. And in the sort of devil we may care environment in which we're moving into, that is seen as being acceptable. To my money, the partnership of 1944, which actually said you've got to design all this on a balanced basis and you serve everybody, is not only more difficult, but is more essential. You only live your life once. And if you have to have the misfortune to be a child going into a school which is on the way down, and there's very little that can do to build that up, because the other schools around you are already doing so much better, then in fact that is not an equitable situation. And I look at this country and say, actually, the strength of any country is people pulling together, not pulling apart. So to support each other is not just an altruistic act. In the long run, it's the only way one can ever succeed. And the way we're designing it now is saying, let's base everything on league tables, and league tables can tell parents which schools are doing well, blah, 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 and the parents say, well, send our child to that school, take them away from somewhere else. That is going to build up pockets of extreme depression and deprivation. And that takes its toll on teachers.